Corruption, another pandemic that needs a cure. Depending on who you ask, the leadership change at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, means different things. Will Nigeria find a cure to this old virus? The president says yes. But in another 5 months, Transparency International will release its global corruption scorecard. How is Nigeria proceeding in its fight against corruption? Tonight, to share insights on the corruption scorecard is Babajide Ogunsanwo, Channels Television's information consultant. You are here again with facts and figures.
Good evening, Amarachi.
Good evening. So what is the biggest challenge in the fight against corruption?
That's a tough question. It perhaps for me will be our preparation to fight corruption. I'd like to share a short story with you. Perhaps my favorite story is the story of David and Goliath. It's in the Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 17, and it's also in the Quran if you look at the Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 250. It talks about David and Goliath. Well, here's the real lesson in the preparation for his fight. There were 5 things that David knew he required as his tools: God, patience, strong feet, 5 smooth stones, and a sling. As David prepared to fight Goliath, he even knew that he did not require a big armor. So David was clear in his preparation to fight Goliath. The question tonight we should ask ourselves is, how prepared? I'm talking about what tools are we using to fight corruption? As it is, it seems that the government, sadly, is Goliath in this case, and corruption perhaps is. And here is why. If you look at the trends so far, I'd like us to look at our corruption scorecard, looking at what has happened between 1999 and 2019 as we await the new release from Transparency International. And if we focus on that, if we look at our corruption scorecard, you'll find out that when we started the Fourth Republic, our score was 1.6 over 10. That was 20 years ago. It's now 2 decades after. Our score is just 2.6 over 10. And so in 20 years, we've moved only from 1.6 over 10 to 2.6 over 10 as scored by Transparency International. That is scary.
How trustworthy is Transparency International's reports? Because some say that their perception is different from reality. So is there any other reliable indicator to measure corruption?
You know, unfortunately, we cannot be the ones to fight corruption. We cannot be a judge in our own case. Yes, Transparency International is a global agency. People have concerns that it's perception, reality. But here's why perception is important. In 1999, when people voted for President Obasanjo, candidate Obasanjo then, he had people that voted, he had 18 million votes. A lot of people don't know him personally, so they voted based on perception. 2007, candidate Umaru Yar'Adua had millions of people, 24 million people voted for him. A lot of those that voted based on perception. In 2011, candidate Jonathan had 22 million people that voted for him. A lot of those, millions don't know President Jonathan, or they didn't know candidate Jonathan personally. So millions vote on perception. In 2015, candidate Buhari had 15 million votes. Many Nigerians don't know him personally, so they voted based on how they perceived him. And so while perception might not always be reality, perception is important because over the world, a lot of great decisions have been made based on perception. And so there's a perception that President Buhari's main focus will be to fight corruption. He's doing that, but he's faced with great challenges based on the reality on ground.
The challenges which you haven't really delved into, but what would you recommend as a tool to fighting corruption?
It's tough. EFCC is meant to be a tool, but let's look at what has happened to the EFCC between 2003, when it was set up, to date. We've seen different leaders. Indeed, from the evidence we have, Ibrahim Magu is the longest serving chairman or acting chairman of the EFCC. Let's take a look at what has happened since 2003. Nuhu Ribadu left in 2007 based on controversial circumstances. Ibrahim Lamode, controversial circumstances. controversial circumstances as well. Came back, issues left under controversial circumstances. Controversial circumstances. And so the evidence we have is that the EFCC is meant to be a tool like David's own slings to fight corruption. But the EFCC, every leader has left based on controversial circumstances, and that is the fact.
So why? Is this because we do not have the right perception of corruption? Or it is because we're way too afraid to attack it head on?
So our corruption scorecard, as we've seen, is still poor. That is the fact. But the reality is that we've tried a different approach to fighting it. Let's look at what President Buhari, General Buhari, did in 1984 in his drive to fight corruption. Let's take a look at that and you'll be shocked. In 1984, March 1984, there was a decree that all public officials that were found to be corrupt will be jailed. 21 years imprisonment if you are found to be corrupt. And in 1984, if you bought property worth 1 million naira or above anywhere in the world, including Nigeria, 1 million naira property bought by any public official was life imprisonment. 1984. But even that life imprisonment did not stop those that were corrupt. And so the evidence shows that since 1960, across all Independence Day, Democracy Day speeches, there has been the drive to fight corruption. But corruption still is today more of David than Goliath.
Babajide, bottom line, what exactly are you saying? Are we really fighting corruption?
Yes, we are. But in the final analysis, I'd like to share this with you, and I'd like everyone to listen carefully. As said by George Orwell, it says that when citizens elect thieves, impostors to power, they are not victims, but they are accomplices to corruption. And so, by the ballot, Nigerians can fight corruption. But if Nigerians always choose to vote for those that will steal, Nigerians will no longer shout and say they are victims, but accomplices to corruption. George Orwell. And so that is one way to fight corruption by voting for those that can get the job done and those that will not steal the money.
You said a lot in just one line. Thanks again for joining us on The News at 10. Always a pleasure having you here.